Good morning, Lucia. It's such a pleasure to finally meet you. Glad we can make this happen today. And
You
uh,
too,
we,
Zach.
we are so excited. Everyone watching this video will have just experienced Girl Talk, probably for the first time. And we have questions. We want to hear the story behind the story and just understand what was on your heart. So, yeah, why don't you tell us where the idea for the film began and really just how the initial pieces came together.
Well, thank you for having me.
Of
Thank
course.
you, Port Townsend. You've been amazing, and I'm very sad I'm not going to be there in person, but this is the next best thing, right? And I just really appreciate how supportive you guys are and how wonderful you have been about supporting my film. So,
No
thank you.
problem. It's our pleasure.
And so. The backstory of this is pretty much my whole life, trying to find my own voice as a young female um, with a lot of passion and a lot of sensitivity and a lot of drive to help change the world in some way. Um, and if you are familiar with my work, which most people in the audience won't be, but it's always been about voice and female voice juxtaposed to male voice and how it resonates or the dissonance behind it or how it's valued. So I have done this first person nonfiction work for 3 of my previous films and have put myself in the film, which has been incredibly vul hard and vulnerable. And I'm so glad that this time the focus is on someone, you know,
Sure.
other than my voice. And it's just wonderful to sort of finally do a film that I've been wanting to do pretty much my whole career. And that was sort of look at the time when young women either speak up or shut down, start to like maybe pretend they're not as smart as they are. And, it's sort of this path that happens. And I was interested in looking at some area in middle school because that's usually where it happens. But I had a informational interview with my original partner who had to leave the project, but she had a daughter who was in high school, senior year, and her best friend from childhood had just become co-captain of the debate team. That was Bella. So,
Okay.
so we went in, we had an informational interview with Bella about debate and what was debate, and I thought debate would be a perfect, you know, situation to try to capture this story. It would be visually very compelling, boys against girls and standing up at a platform. And little did I know how complicated it would be. But Bella, at the end of the informational interview, said to us, "Well, my coach Josh is open to having you guys come and film." And documentary, everybody says it over and over again. The key to documentary is access and trust. And so we were just sort of the doors opened, the floodgates opened. And yes, we had to get lots of permission from parents, et cetera, et cetera. But we decided to go explore this fascinating world of debate. And what we were most impressed by, we went to their first meeting of the year at Bella's house. And what we were most impressed by was how dedicated these kids were.
Totally.
Like we hadn't even seen debate in action. We didn't really understand the complexity of what we were about to step into. And it was just so impressive to see Ben and Bella and Veronica, who's not as featured in the film as Ben and Bella are, but how they were bringing together their team and setting goals and setting sort of a framework with which to start the year.
Yeah.
And so we kind of just went for it. And it was initially supposed to be a year in the life of this team. And
Mhm.
as we started to film, we started to realize like, oh, the boys tend to have more confidence than the girls.
Wow.
Just right out the bat, it was just translated that way on camera, and we were like, oh, this is not going to be a year in the life. It's too complicated. And we got access to the team, but we had to get access from the school, we had to get access from the superintendent, we had to get all the buy-in from the parents and the kids. So that took several months. And then we had to get the buy-in from the debate community too, and the board. That it's so funny because it's a public event, but they don't want you filming necessarily because they're very keen on keeping their arguments private.
Mhm.
So anyway, so it was a long journey.
I think the things that stuck out to me were when some of these, the novices were kind of saying, speaking from their position of vulnerability, like, how do I not sound too, aggressive, or how do I, and just seeing what goes on inside their minds as they're trying to recognize the reality that they have a disadvantage being girls, and wanting to also crush it because they're filled with ambition and drive, and the fact that their mentors are also young students is just so cool. I mean, I felt super jealous that I wasn't in debate, honestly.
Yes, and I don't want to tell you what I was doing at their age, um, but I certainly wasn't doing debate. Um, and it's also for boys. This is what's so unique about this team. What I loved about this team is, the boys still are sexist. They know they are, but they're really trying to be, this. It comes from Josh, a lot of the leadership. He had twins. He had a boy and a girl, and
Okay.
they were in debate, and that's how he started to coach. The team was very young at Newton South, and he came over and he was this volunteer part-time coach, and they went on and graduated, so they're not in the film. But he saw how Keith, his son, did hardly study, hardly prepped, came in and just knew he was going to win. And then he saw his daughter with like 20 pages of notes and studying the topic and getting the pros and cons, and she just didn't have the same confidence. And he sort of wanted to make this, he was more interested in the educational aspect of debate. He liked the competition because it would drive them to work harder, but he was really interested in the critical thinking, the sort of effort that goes into it, the sort of worldview you develop at a young age where a lot of kids are not developing that. And he wanted to engender a welcoming a welcoming atmosphere. And so the the team grew really large. I mean, normally teams are small. They're like 4 to 6 debaters that go off and get all the support so from a school. So it's not every school is structured like that, and not every coach has that sort of vision. I mean, and then the kids adopt it, and the kids actually take it a step further, and they, unlike other teams who have full-time coaches, paid coaches, they meet every day. That's so unique. They do the research. They get charged about learning, which
Wow.
is, a lot of times there's not enough time for these kids to learn all these background issues, and the paid coach will often help prep, where Josh Josh would bring in the big picture, like how is this going to convince a judge of what you're saying? What's the story? His mantra was like, what's the story you're telling? He was not as interested in the minutia of the arguments and how to trick and how to like maneuver. He was
Yeah.
much more interested in.
When you were filming all the subjects, but especially the five, were there moments when you had to kind of slowly condition them to the presence of the camera? I mean, there are bold, extremely courageous young girls, um, but it's a whole nother thing to be in front of a camera, especially when it's like this far away. So, do you
How
think
did
that?
you know I was that far away?
Oh, I know some things.
um, no, I mean, I had this little camera rig,
Hmm.
and I would hold it up to my face, So I would get in close, and a lot of times, you have a bigger camera rig, you step back and you try to capture these moments. Um, and it would vary. Sometimes I was on a tripod and I would try to get these moments. And then after like 2 or 3 years of me filming by myself, I brought in some professional, I mean, not that I'm not a professional camera people, but people that spend their whole time doing camera. And I have a new appreciation. I've done camera work all along, but this one was where I did like 80% of the filming with this small rig, and I had a sound person. So
It
I
seems like
just
you were in some tight spots in the crowd.
very tight
Yeah.
thoughts. A life pre-COVID when they were like falling all over each other like kittens.
Mhm.
Um, I think it was a ebb and flow. When they were young, they were more. It was interesting because they were more trusting. They were excited about being in a documentary, and they're used to performing. Debate is a performative
Totally.
activity. So when I'd go in and they were debating, they would forget that the camera was even there for the most part.
Yeah.
When I was doing those intimate moments where they're just sitting and hanging out with each other, I was just with them all day and they were focused on their arguments and etc. I think it was harder to get access to their homes
Mhm.
and to get those intimate moments in their bedrooms, and that took 2 to 3 years to sort of develop that closeness. And so even though we think we're maybe with them as a freshman, it's more their, end of sophomore year, junior year, where I was able to finally build trust with a particular group of girls. I mean, some of them didn't want me filming. Like the first year was about almost like casting. I hate to say that, but who was open to me filming? Who was open to like when I drop in? Like I had to go back, I had to go away and do another job to pay for everything. But I would come back and embed myself, and I think it was helpful that early on I got a nice funder to give me some money so that I could embed myself for the first 3 months and learn the world and learn who the kids were. And, I wanted to do some of the shyer kids, the kids that weren't, as obviously successful right at the bat. But that was harder to access them, you know. Um, Hannah became one of them. She was pretty shy initially, but she was open to me filming. So that
Got
was an interesting twist. And I found her fascinating. But she would run sometimes she would run hot, but then as she got older, they started to run cold. So that was what was very fascinating. When they became like seniors, they were like, "Aren't you done yet?" And that was kind of the critical time I needed to film them. And um,
it seemed like they were totally unaffected, so I just wondered if it's awesome that you had so much access and time to gain that trust and also just familiarity. Maybe there's even an advantage of them being young, that they just got so many of their own things to worry about. But yeah, it
well,
felt
the
completely.
parents, I think sometimes the parents were harder to like
Oh,
build
sure.
trust with, and especially with the boys. It was interesting because
Mm.
one of the mothers was like, "Well, are you going to make him look bad?" They didn't know what I was doing, and I kept saying, "I'm not interested in the dramas. I'm not interested in the infighting. Hold on. That is not what I'm interested in telling. I'm not a reality TV show. I'm more interested in intimate moments, moments that the audience can understand why you would want to do this crazy activity." I mean, one of the things that I always like to tell is Bella turns to Lisa and I, who was my original partner, and says, "We get up at 6 in the morning and then we go to debate and we're there at 7:30 and then we debate till 8 p.m. and then we go out and have pizza and then it's 10. Isn't that amazing?" And Lisa and I were both like, "Ah, oh my God, no, what have we gotten ourselves into?" So, I mean, their energy levels were so different than ours. And sometimes I was like, what do they think of this old lady who's like their mother's age or older and following them around with a camera? But they initially referred to me as the documentary crew. I'm like, okay, fine, that works for me, even though you have no idea. This is not a crew. This is my passion. And but they now know. They now know.
I just want to hear your heart pour out in a stream of consciousness about like that after, you know, you finally got total final cut, you know, and it was ready to go for special preview screening. At that point towards today, what are the moments within that span of time that just speak to you and stand out? Yeah.
Well, a film like this, a 7-year project, right? It's it really is a journey of discovery. And just when you think you've figured it out, something new happens in the lives of these kids, and something surprising in the response that you get to the work that you're doing. Initially, I wanted to do an entirely observational film without interviews,
Mm.
and it just didn't work because there were so many kids. It was so complicated. I mean, I knew from day one, we knew from like day one that translating what was going on in debate was going to be a huge issue, because when we sat through our first debates, we were like, what did we just witness? I don't even understand what they said. I don't even understand what's going on. I have no idea. How are we going to translate this to the viewer? And the visual cues are all opposite of what you think they are. Like when you're getting to final rounds, which
Mhm.
I didn't even fully understand, like you're getting to final rounds, and when you lose, you're given a trophy and the next team moves forward. So it's sort of like even the visual cues are, they don't translate without explanation. So yeah, very early on we knew that debating itself would be hugely complex to translate to the cinema and have a cinematic experience. And we were, and there's so many rules, like Hannah says, you know, and there's subtle rules of, like, as you said, the voice and the posture, and why do you put your feet on the floor like sticky glue, and what's that all about? And you know, so there's so much minutia in that. So that was a huge problem we knew from the beginning. And then just getting access inside the debates themselves was very difficult. Took almost a full year. Um, and we knew that that was where that was, you know, we were happy to be filming the cafeteria and all the drama behind the scenes, but we really knew the action and the suspense was in the debate itself. But how do you put a 45-minute debate in a movie? I mean, plus they were going to 21 different tournaments, and there are 30 people on the team, and you know, they all are wearing suits. So anyway, that was a huge challenge, and it was the challenge, and it's why I brought on an outside editor. It was so complicated to
Yeah.
translate this. And I wanted, you know, one of the big challenges is I wanted to appeal to the debate community and
Mhm.
not dumb it down. And then I wanted to be able to have lay people like you and me understand what was going on. So that was one of the biggest challenges. The other was trust and the kids, and as they're growing up, and as are they going to drop out? And you know, I couldn't be on the ground all the time. There's spurts where I was able to be on the ground, and then I would dip in, and you know, there was one period where I didn't go back there for like 5 months, you know. So it's hard to track the development when you're not embedded in the same way. But it's impossible. I mean, budgets these days, I mean, funding, everything.
What was the reaction from the debate community or from any of the?
They are, for the most part, really into it. The coaches loved it. Everybody on the team loved it. The parents loved it. I mean, because it was a deal. We said early on, we're not interested in the drama, and I was like, just let me film it, and then you can tell me whether you want it or not. And then if it ends up in the cut, even though you've told me not to use it, um, there's a reason, and then we can discuss it once I have a rough, a fine cut. So I had this screening in October of last year. It's now almost a full year. I had it, and I invited the families of the core people
Yeah.
featured, and we were far from being done. I mean, it was a 2-year edit with my editor,
Wow.
and I'm an editor, and I sat with her almost daily, and we collaborate. It was a real collaboration because she had to learn the whole debate world, and we had over 800 hours of footage because each debate is 45 minutes, and then you have 3 cameras covering it. So, I mean, I'm even being very liberal with that. It could be a lot more. We just never counted it, how many hours, but
Many
it was
terabytes.
it was a lot. So it was so when you say what's the process of discovery, I mean, we had a lot of help. We were lucky we got Sundance funding. We didn't go to the festival, but we got funding. And then what they do, which is what I love most about what they do, is they have these labs. And
Yeah.
so when we were close to being done in September of or July of last year, um, July of, I should say, 2021,
Mhm.
we were invited to the labs, and they were like, nope, you're so far from being done. It's like there's so much you need to clarify here, and it was actually very great because both my editor and I were kind of really eager to finish. That always happens. You want to finish, you want to be done with it, and it just wasn't landing in some spots. So back to the drawing board, back to the cutting room. But luckily, I had this amazingly talented editor, Rachel Clark, who I collaborated with, and we had collaborated on another job together. I had been her co-editor on a job, so we knew we worked well together. But
Mhm.
this was me giving the reins to her, and I learned so much from her. So,
Wow.
and she says vice versa, so that's pretty cool.
That is cool. Is there something you wished I had asked you, or something that you want people to know about the film, or something you especially want to talk about, or for an audience that's just experiencing this whole world for the first time, or something about your story? Just
Well, a lot of people like to ask, what's your next project? And a lot of people like to ask, where are the girls? Where are they now? And that's more not my heart, but I know that's always the question. So, but it is my heart. I'm so proud of the girls. I mean, I didn't have children um, myself, and so I felt like I became an auntie to all of these girls. And Anika is about to finish at Wash U. She's a finance major and history major. Gabby is one more year at Tufts. You saw that she was going to Tufts, but she
yeah.
became a political science major, and she studied abroad in Czechoslovakia, Prague last year. And Jay took a gap year for COVID, but he's at Harvard.
Cool.
Um, Bella is in her second year of medical school at Brown. So she did this thing in
Oh,
Brown where you get accepted to medical school early because she's always wanted to be a pediatrician. And so she's studying medicine. And um, Hannah, she's like mathematician. She's just double major. She's going to be she graduated. Wait. She graduated Harvard. Dan, her partner, graduated Harvard. They're both going to get PhDs. Um, and yeah, and Gil. So Gil went to, Brown too with her twin, and she ended up doing computer science, and she got a job at some place she worked at in New York. So she and Gil have moved to New York City. So Um, yeah, so that's the update of the girls. And then Ben Sylvian, who was the co-captain with Bella, um, is also, he went to Chicago University and he's also doing some stuff in finance. So yes, they are impressive, and yes, they are going to be the future leaders. They already are within their own worlds. Like, I think Anika went to WashU and was immediately elected some sort of president of club, and I mean, they're not shy. I
Yeah.
think Gabby's the shyest, but I mean, they're taking life by the
Mhm.
horns, or
Yeah.
whatever the expression is. So I'm so proud of them. And I think the other thing that's really close to my heart is this could be any world where it could be on the sports field, it could be in STEM, it could be in so many different worlds where you're trying to break glass ceilings. And so as much as I'm so happy the debate world is being responsive, and all the female leaders who see this and sort of identify with these struggles, and I just feel like it's a discussion. Like, I'm really excited about the discussions we're starting to have about implicit bias, and,
Mhm.
also your own self-doubt, and where does that come from, and how can we as a culture work together, boys and girls, together, helping this dynamic. We need to change it. We started it and we didn't know that Trump would be elected president. And it became very interesting. Well, I mean, disconcerting, just the kinds of discussions about women and demeaning women, and when he ran up against Hillary, all these things that were sort of, you know, debates a microcosm of the national stage, right?
Yeah.
So we found that out, and I'm just excited about the potential for things to change. Like, I've heard from some debate camps, like, I don't have that same issue anymore. These guys are more woke, but then the other girl raises her hand and she says, "Well, I do." So there is still a lot of work to be done within the debate community, within the world. But I do feel it's something that, maybe it's a pipe dream still. Maybe I'm still too much of an idealist, but I feel like both worlds, like both the more democratic world and the world that maybe is more what they call red, we all have to have relationships with boys and girls. And this is all something we struggle with and try to, recognize. So if you can learn about your implicit bias early on, that's great. And I really constructed it so that the audience would come in and they would be the judge. And they would have to check their own implicit biases. And so the first line of the film is Bella saying, "Are you ready?"
Yeah.
So I really am excited about that aspect of the film and the discussions that are coming from that.
That was awesome. That was so perfect. Congratulations on your achievement. I think
Thank you.
this will serve to, you know, um, inspire discussion and conversation and change immediately and for many years to come. This is not something that you pulled out of a bag overnight. This is such a well-crafted, masterful insight into this kind of unknown, relatively speaking, but brilliant world, brilliant.
Well, thank you. And
Yeah.
the other question is, like, what are you doing next?
Yeah.
And so I wanted to say, well, one, I'm distributing the film. That's a 2-year project, but I'm semi-retired. I'm battling an illness,
Mhm.
and I think that I'm grateful. I am so utterly grateful that I get to see the film out there, and I get to see audience responses. And if anybody in the audience wants to reach out to our team, we have a great outreach impact team.
Oh,
They
cool.
can get in touch with us, through our website. They know that. But I'm just grateful I got to see I've gotten to see that it is, starting to spark change. And, it's not, I used to think I could change the world as a filmmaker. I now think at least I can spark discussion. At least I can open some minds, perhaps.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm very excited
I wouldn't be surprised if you're also changing the world.
about. Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you,
You've
Lucia.
been so wonderful. It was such a pleasure. And I hope the festival goes really well for you. I
Thank
hope
you.
it's a charge, and I hope everyone stays safe.
Totally.
Um, you know, okay, well, best of luck.
Thank you, you
And
too.
I'm so sorry again, I can't be there in person, but I feel that I'm there in spirit. So
Cheers. Thank you so
cheers.
much, Lucia. Have
Okay.
a good day.
Bye bye. Bye
Bye.
bye.